And the white man, we say, is the devil.
God said that the white race is a race of devils. I didn't say it. I just believe it because of their actions and their history. Show me the saintly ones.
Peace, peace, peace. Hotep, Shalom, Paz, Islam. Rami SalaamEl, and I thank you for joining us. The question of the day is the white man the devil? And before I answer that, we gotta clear some misconceptions. Number one, they are not the white man. They are Europeans. Their skin complexion is not white. Let me repeat that. They are not the white man. They are Europeans. Their skin complexion is not white. And I, and people who look like me, are not the black man. We are Moors. Our skin complexion is not black. Understand? They are not white people. We are not black people. Europeans, Moors. Europeans, Moors. Europeans, Moors. Okay? But see, still the Europeans, they're still the evil. They do all the devilish, and they kill, and they've enslaved us, and they're doing all of this all over the world. Let's clear up another misconception. The image is to a book, is from the cover of a book called White Gold, The Forgotten Story of North Africa's 1 million European Slaves. I put that up there so that I can say this. We got to cut the bullshit. We have to stop pretending like, we are just the innocent victims, that we were the most pure and, holy and just good, morally righteous people ever to walk this earth, and we never did no wrong to anyone. And so all of these things, this enslavement, all of the discrimination, all of the disrespect, and all of this, and killing, and all of the things that are going wrong with us right now, it's just out of nowhere, and we're just the poor innocent victims. Really? Really?
Come on, son. Know your business. Know your history.
What's happening to us is a universal law. Some people call it karma. What you put out into the universe, you get back. If we are now being enslaved, then we must have had to put out enslaving people. You see how that works? It's universal. It applies to everyone. Europeans have done foul things. They are receiving karma and have received karma. Asians have done foul things. Arabs have done foul things. Africans have done foul things. And so-called Americans, really U.S. citizens, are doing foul things. Not just in the past, but right now. Not just what they did to the Japanese and Vietnam and all over there, but right now it's happening right now. Don't believe me? See for yourself.
واللي كانوا حاضرين موجودين هناك لما شافوا هذه الدخان اللي طلع مع هذه ماتوا كلهم أطفال ونساء. أطفال ونساء وشيوخ. فقط يعني 3 من شباب. ولا البقية كلهم شيوخ ونساء وأطفال. يعني 46 بما 5 حريم يحملين في بطونهن أجنة. على طول حركت سيارة إلى المواقيت والبوش بشر منطقة والأطفال اللي هم جاريح. معناته بيقول لك نحن كلنا قاعدة، ما دام الأطفال قاعدة نحن قاعدة. إيش في؟ ما دام الأطفال إرهاب معناتها احنا كلنا ارهابيين.
الساعة 6 الصبح
صارح
أنا كل نايم وكنا نجالس في مجلسة والعجن لخبز هذا سبايح قلت أنا هكذا قلت ساكت بدون كلام ما راحت فينا والغابت أنا لغبت كل ما حتى هو انتدع وعيالي وبنتي وزوجي وعيالي كلهم انتهوا ما بغيت إلا أنا وهذا وأبوه وهذا الشايب وهذا الولدان.
سبايح ورغيف هاي وهذا المي ويدعك تماما.
When we went there, we saw what happened. Of course, our government does not have this kind of rockets. And you see all the shells all over, unbelievable. Of course, there was marking made in the United States of America. It was all.
If someone goes into a shopping mall in pursuit of one of their enemies and opens fire on a crowd of people and guns down a bunch of innocent people in a shopping mall, they've murdered those people. When the Obama administration sets a policy where patterns of life are enough of a green light to drop missiles on people or to use, to send in AC-130s to spray them down.
But that wasn't the case here. You're talking about a targeted person here.
No. That's not. But if you go to the village of Al-Majla in Yemen, where I was, and you see the unexploded cluster bombs, and you have the list and photographic evidence, as I do, of the women and children that represented the vast majority of the deaths in this first strike that Obama authorized on Yemen, those people were murdered by President Obama on his orders because there was believed to be someone from Al-Qaeda in that area. There's only one person that's been identified that had any connection to Al-Qaeda there. And 21 women and 14 children were killed in that strike. And the U.S. tried to cover it up and say it was a Yemeni strike. And we know from the WikiLeaks cables that David Petraeus conspired with the president of Yemen to lie to the world about who did that bombing. It's murder it's mass murder when you say we are going to bomb this area because we believe a terrorist is there and you know that women and children are in the area. The United States has an obligation to not bomb that area if they believe that women and children are there. I'm sorry, that's murder.
And I don't want to get too political, so I would ask for you to do more research and studying on what's going on with the drones and just the warfare that is being pushed by the U.S. and all the innocent men, women, and children and elderly that are being murdered in Syria, in Libya, in Iraq, Afghanistan, Iran, Yemen, all over the world by the U.S. government and the U.S. soldiers. And so if you are a U.S. citizen paying taxes, you are directly responsible. You don't have the full responsibility. That's not what I'm saying. I mean, and I'm not even saying you, because I as well. I'm trapped in the system as well in some respects. But we have a responsibility, and we are partaking in a system that is doing terrible things to people all around the world right now. So you can't just try to point the finger at the so-called white man, the Europeans, as if they are just the absolute evil people on the earth. It's not how it goes. Okay, now let's address the actual question. Is the white man the devil? No. But let me show him proof. Let's see. First we have The Golden Trade of the Moors. This is by Edward William Boville. See that bottom there? Showing the trade. The Golden Trade of the Moors. Another book, and I'm not even going to get into the text of these because I would like for you to pick them up and research them for yourself. This one here is The Story of the Moors in Spain. See that? Some Moor on the front cover. And this one is by Stanley Lane Poole. I'm going to read a few sentences from the excerpt on the back here. The story of the Moors in Spain was first published in 1886. This work is classic in its field and has been so for over 100 years. A little further down, of all of his Stanley Lane Poole's historical works, the Moors in Spain is preeminent, and it is a privilege for the present reader to study this great historical classic. The decline and fall of the Moorish Empire was a great setback to modern civilization. Had this great African culture been able to survive, the world would have been 500 years more advanced than it is today. All serious students of history should read this book. Say that one more time. All serious students of history should read this book. It is of special value to students of African history, who should be glad that this historical classic is now back in print. And that is actually from the introduction. It was written by John G. Jackson. And Stanley Land Poole and Edward William Boville are both Europeans. Understand that. Now we're going to get another European. Dogs of God. Columbus, the Inquisition, and the Defeat of the Moors by James Reston Jr. I'm also not even going to go into much of this. I'm just going to read the prologue. Small excerpt here. It has been suggested that the three most important years in American history are 1492, 1776, and 1865. Of these, 1492 goes far beyond American history. It is pivotal as well in Spanish history, in Jewish and Arab history, in world and church history. Indeed, it is difficult to imagine another single year in the past millennium when so many significant strands of history came together and so changed the world in one swoop. Pay attention. The completion of the 500-year movement to conquer the Moors, the end of the 800-year reign of the glorious culture of Islamic Spain, the consolidation of the modern Spanish state, the sinister explosion of the Spanish Inquisition, the Spanish Renaissance in art and literature, the expulsion of the Jews, the discovery of the New World, and the subsequent division of the world between Spanish and Portuguese spheres of influence. All this was going on in 1492. But the most significant part of that whole thing that I want you to focus on, the completion of the 500-year movement to conquer the Moors, and the end of an 800-year reign of the glorious culture of Islamic Spain. Al-Andalus was the Moorish name of Spain. And when they're saying Islamic, they're referring to Moors. I read this because this book is about the defeat of the Moors. And even though it's focusing on the defeat and how the Christians, you have to also realize in history, it's not just speaking about in the religious sense in terms of Christians and Muslims. These were a group of people. Okay? But even in the telling of the defeat of the Moors, the European is telling you it was a 500-year movement to conquer our ancestors. 500 years. Think about how long that is. And 800 years of a glorious culture. Furthermore, if you look up, what is it called? It's a documentary called When Moors Ruled Europe. Punch this on YouTube. I'll actually put the link in the description below. That's a documentary that's narrated and features mostly European people, all giving praise to the glorious culture of the Moors that came into Spain and civilized Europe. The architecture, the science, the art, the food, the culture, our ancestors. Let's continue. Let's get a little more specific now. Where are we at? All right. This book is called Sacred Drift, Essays on the Margins of Islam by Peter Lamborn Wilson. If you see there, you see a sphinx in the back. There's a pyramid right there. And right in the center, you have a man with his hand over his heart wearing a fez. Noble Drew Ali, in case you were wondering. I'm going to read a few excerpts from this book. I'm going to start on page 15. The official sources describe Noble Drew Ali as a founder of the first, quote unquote, just so you understand, black Islamic sect in America. In truth, he was less than this, for there were black Muslims, M-O-S-L-E-M-S, Muslims, here before him. But he was also more than this. He was an American prophet. Noble Drew Ali was an American prophet. He could have stepped from the pages of Melville or Ishmael Reed. A thought of Allah clothed in flesh. A fact, a poetic fact. I'm going to flip over to page 23. Drew Ali is a racialist, but not a racist. He calls on every nation to love instead of hate, and every man need to worship under his own vine and fig tree. He was concerned especially and naturally with his own people, but considered that any Asiatic had the right to join the Moor Science Temple, including Amerindians, Chinese and Japanese, and even quote-unquote whites as Celts or Persians. Pale folk come in for some criticism in the Circle 7, or the Holy Quran of the Moorish Holy Temple of Science, or the Holy Quran of the Moorish Science Temple of America, just so we understand what the Circle 7 is. Pale folk come in for some criticism in the Circle 7, but there is no atmosphere of race hate, as with Elijah Muhammad's later Nation of Islam. The emphasis is always on love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. I'm going to skip to the end here on page 50. Because the rest of this, it actually speaks about the history of the Moor Science Temple and how it after he passed, Noble Drew Ali, that is, past form, it broke off into different sects or different branches of the temple, and some people went with this branch and some people went with that one. And I would ask you to pick up Sacred Drift so you can find out for yourself. That's not really the point, but I want to focus on this last part here. It says, all these branches and offshoots of the Moor Science Temple add up to conclusive proof of at least one fact. As a prophet and founder of a religion, Noble Drew Ali was no flash in the pan. Moor science is still alive. It is also worth pointing out that the world still needs Noble Drew's message of love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice, and that our own society especially needs his subtle message of racial pride combined with tolerance and love. By Americanizing the prophetic spirit, he injected our culture with a kind of folk Sufism. On the esoteric level, anyone who loves love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice is a member of the Asiatic race and the lost found Moorish nation of North America. This is from Peter Lamborn Wilson, Sacred Drift, another European. And there's some questionable statements in there about Noble Drew Ali, but I still suggest you pick up the book because there's a lot of key information that you won't find in a lot of other scholars' books. But we'll save those people for later. Now we are going to go to the seventh seal. The Synchronicity and the Seventh Seal by Peter Moon. European. You guessed it. And I'm going to read from chapter 35. I just want you to see that there. Whole chapter dedicated to who? Isn't that something? Let's continue reading on, shall we? After reading Peter Wilson's Sacred Gift, I was a bit astonished to find out independently that Drew Ali was not only a real character in our history, who not only appeared in the newspapers of his time but has a substantial FBI file, the entirety of which has not been released to the public at this time. In fact, he was doggedly scrutinized by J. Edgar Hoover's FBI during the Roaring Twenties. Although he was by no means the first black Muslim in America, he is believed to be the first black Muslim prophet. It is not surprising that he has been obscured and forgotten by most white historians, but it is even more alarming that the majority of his fellow African Americans are equally ignorant of his incredible life. Let me read that one more time. It is not surprising that he has been obscured and forgotten by most white historians, but it is even more alarming that the majority of his fellow African Americans are equally ignorant of his incredible life. It will send the shock of ignorance through many people's nervous systems to learn that Drew Ali's murder was a pivotal point in history, which eventually gave rise to contemporarily recognized figures such as Louis Farrakhan, Malcolm X, El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz, we'll get to that later, and Elijah Muhammad. Although these characters are not known to have shed light on Drew Ali or his heritage, they would have never risen to their grandiose station in life had it not been for his legacy. Then we're also going to read from page 299. 299? No, 289, excuse me. History lesson is the name of the chapter. Morocco was the first country in history to officially recognize the fledgling United States of America, and when they did, Washington was presented with the Moorish flag. At the time, the Moroccan flag was pure red and was sometimes thought of as a cherry. Drew Ali stated to all who would listen that at the inception of our nation, a treaty was worked out with Morocco that any Moor, black person, or Asiatic, which was also interpreted to mean Caucasians when necessary, and that's also because Europe is in Asia, could claim themselves to be a Moorish national and thus be free from the bondage of slavery. This distinctly meant that if you were a slave on a plantation and walked over to the president's office and declared yourself a Moorish national, even if you were from a more primitive African tribe or country, you would be declared the subject of a sovereign nation and your citizenship would be restored. In other words, you were a free man. By declaring yourself a Moorish national, you became a free man. While the terms of this treaty were readily accepted by Washington, he made no significant effort to circulate or promote these terms. Let's say that for later. In what could easily be considered one of the greatest ruses of history, colored people were not informed of the means by which they could free themselves, and were thus tricked. This is the exact meaning of George Washington chopping down the cherry tree. This is why the minstrel rendition includes the black person being in the cherry tree or outhouse when it was taken down. In Peter Wilson's Sacred Drift, a version of the above story is included, but again, he is a master of understatement. If you do take the time and exhibit the patience to research the actual history of Morocco and the United States, you can find some very interesting information that demonstrates the above to be decidedly true. Interesting. This is in Synchronicity and the Seventh Seal by our brother and friend Peter Moon. But wait, there is more. Hold on, ladies and gentlemen. Now we have the Montauk Book of the Dead, again by Peter Moon. We're going to go to page 397. 397, the chapter is entitled The Moors Gate. Interesting. Let's find out what this is talking about. Since writing the Seventh Seal, I had been searching for an answer to find out why the entrance to Old Jerusalem near the Wailing Wall is known as the Moors Gate. No one was able to give me a satisfactory answer. I also tried the web, but when you are searching for obscure subjects, the internet is sometimes a very difficult tool. You have to try different word combinations and related subjects when you're not getting an answer. Just plugging in the word is not enough. By doing a meta search for different words or names in the various articles I found, I came across a somewhat obscure but very interesting piece of research concerning the Moors and the Holy Land. It turns out that one of the most hotly disputed territories in the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, as far as existing legal documents go, belongs to neither party. According to this research, it belongs to the Moors. Let's continue. On page 400. What is most significant, however, is that the Moors are hardwired into the entire schematic of the Holy Land in such a way that ultimately they cannot be ignored. Though virtually none of our major world politicians could admit it, the Moors are not only a part of the infrastructure of Jerusalem, but of the entire world and its political structure. It is, however, very mysterious. Many of the politicians are not too savvy at all with regard to what I am speaking of, but there are key players who are. The Moorish issue is like a secret code, but it is not one they really use. They of course know about it and mimic it in some of their secret symbols in an attempt to siphon off the power. They would never actually use this Moorish code itself because it is tantamount to making their house of cards fall down. You see, this Moorish code I am referring to is another word for revelation. But I'm not talking about the canned stereotype version of revelation that you might hear a so-called religious zealot talk about. Exposing this Moorish code reveals the truth. And the truth leads to more and more revelation of the way things really are. It is more like a tsunami wave that is about to hit our culture. It may be far off on the horizon right now, but it is just a matter of time before it hits the shore. When I said above that there are far deeper implications to the Moors issue than a religious skirmish in Palestine, I am referring to how it might affect the world economy and the shores of the United States. There are a lot of things to reconcile, but I am not referring to slave reparations. The injustice of slavery is really just the tip of the iceberg. The issues I have already referred to in this book reach far beyond human slavery. If everyone, not just the so-called black people, are going to find their way back home, they need to know the truth. As a whole, society is not ready to go whole track, so we can begin at the Moors Gate. Let me read one more sentence again. Peter Boone. If everyone, not just the so-called black people, are going to find their way back home, they need to know the truth. The Montauk Book of the Dead, Peter Moon. But wait, there is more. Oh. Spandau Mystery, Peter Moon. And if you notice a guy right here on this cover, if you look very closely, who is that? You guessed it. Noble Drew Ali. Let's go to page 62. In this chapter, 62, it's called El Morocco, just in case you were wondering. The Moor then pointed to an Oriental man who was wearing a rainbow-colored cap, which made him stand out amongst the others. He was also wearing a white saffron robe. Crowley looked up at the Tibetan as if he recognized him. He gestured to Rose, and the entire party made their way to the table of the Moor's entourage. Although not a word was spoken, this was a very special gathering of a brotherhood that traced its roots back to the ancient magi of antiquity. They were a sacred brotherhood of wisdom that reached across continents. On this morning, they had gathered to celebrate the initiation of young Timothy Drew, a man who was just about to begin his education in the brotherhood. Just days before, the Moor, at the direction of his brethren, had taken a blindfolded Timothy to the king's chamber, whereupon he was to either find his way out or perish. It was an ancient rite of initiation into adeptship, but it was not offered to just anyone. Timothy Drew was a man of special abilities, who had found his way from America to the delta of the Nile. From there, it did not take him long to get to Cairo, then Egypt, just so in case you're wondering. When he finally arrived, the brethren was already waiting for him. In fact, he was expected, not because he had sent a letter or was summoned by normal human means, but because it was foreseen. Now that he had passed the initial test of initiation, he would undergo a 10-year training program before returning to America to teach that land the truth of its ancient heritage and what had been forgotten. Then moving over to 63 in the story. It reads, as murmurs could be heard all across the table, two Caucasian men at the end of the table, one rather short, began a rather animated discussion. Ayahuasca the Moor then stood up and addressed the group. Our new initiate has indeed shown his worthiness. Perhaps he would like to treat our new friends to a demonstration of what I discussed with Carl yesterday. You mean the power of vril? Asked Carl Hess. Vril is V-R-I-L, if you want to look that up. The Moor nodded, and all suddenly became quiet. The Tibetan, with the rainbow hat, then produced a piece of parchment. Use this, said the Tibetan. It will make the job easier. The Moor was about to test the new initiate's abilities. He did not know, but readily suspected that the young Timothy Drew could move this leather parchment without touching it. Placing the parchment in front of Timothy Drew, he cleared off the rest of the table. Everyone was silent again. Timothy concentrated but did not waste any time. Before anyone could think skeptical thoughts. He had, either through pure will alone or by a staged magician's trick, lifted the parchment up off of the table without touching it. It then began to move, ostensibly at the will of Timothy Drew, in the direction of young Hess. As it moved towards the young man, however, the direction of the flow was interrupted. Instead, it began to shift towards Aleister Crowley, as if it were being influenced by another force. The parchment then appeared to tug itself back in the direction of the young Hess, as if there were a war of two wills. Finally, the parchment moved unfettered and stood right in front of Rudolph. "Grab it," said the Tibetan, and the young boy did. "Well, there you have it," said the Moor to Karl Hess. "What I told you yesterday about the pyramids is backed up by more than a simple theory. You have now experienced the force of will, also known as the vril. Remember, the power of the vril is the power of the pyramid, and that is the power of Allah. And that is what we are all here to discuss. I must now ask our new friends to leave us to our work." Spandau Mystery, Peter Moon. Now, I mean, if that wasn't enough, if you don't, is reading is one thing, but perhaps let me show you. You can see someone speaking, so you can see it for yourself, and it maybe can convince you just that much more how real this is. And I'm going to tie it all together, and you'll understand once we get done.
All right, let me ask you a question. You were talking about treaties, rules, and regulations. Do you have any indigenous treaties that you'd like to talk about?
There's one that I just learned about. I didn't know about it. There's a group called the Moors. And
where are they from?
Well, they were in Morocco, and they had some pretty powerful treaties. They were the first country that had a treaty with the United States after the Revolutionary War. And this group actually is taking credit for bringing humanity through the Dark Ages. They were the ones that had the Arabs in Spain. They were the ones that had all the knowledge. That was how we got out of the Dark Ages. It was through them. They had kept the light of human information burning. And of course, there are a lot of other indigenous groups too, but that was the one that I just learned about. I was excited to learn about them.
Very interesting.
Isn't that interesting?
Yes, it's very interesting.
And I know some of you may be thinking, what does all this information about the Moors, about what they were doing in Spain, about Noble Drew Ali, about the Moor Science Temple of America, what does that have to do with the Europeans being the devil or not? And I am very glad that you've asked that question. Now we are going to go to the Holy Quran, or the Moorish Holy Temple of Science. Also, the Moorish Science Temple of America is also referred to the Holy Quran Circle 7, just so we're clear. And in chapter 3, entitled Elihu's Lessons, the Unity of Life, we're going to go to line 21. The only devil from which men must be redeemed is self, the lower self. If man would find his devil, he must look within. His name is self. If man would find his devil, he must look within. His name is self. If man would find his devil, he must look within. His name is self. Now this is divinely prepared by the noble prophet Drew Ali. And that line doesn't say, if man would find his devil, he must look at the so-called white man. If man would find his devil, he must look at the Europeans. If man would find his devil, he must look at the Caucasians, or the white folk, or the pale-skinned people. It says, If man would find his devil, he must look within. His name is self. Does that make it clear to you? The so-called white man is not the devil. The devil is yours and mine and our lower selves. And in here it also speaks about the difference between the lower self and the higher self, because there are two selves. Let's read. Line 5. There are two selves, the higher and lower self. The higher self is human spirit clothed with soul, made in the form of Allah. The lower self, the carnal self, the body of desires, is a reflection of higher self, distorted by murky ethers of the flesh. The higher self is Allah in man. The higher self is Allah in man. And the lower self is the devil. God and the devil. Allah and the devil. Allah being the higher self, the devil being the lower self. Within you, and within I, and with us. All of us. Further on, the higher self is the embodiment of truth. The lower self is truth reversed, and so is falsehood manifest. The higher self is justice, mercy, love, and right. The lower self is what the higher self is not. The lower self breeds hatred, slander, lewdness, murders, theft, and everything that harms. The higher self is the embodiment of truth. The lower self is the reverse, falsehood. The higher self, our God self, is truth. The lower self, the devil, is lies. Do you understand? It's not saying that the white man is the devil. No, no, no. The European, no, no, no. The pale folk, no, no, no. The Caucasians, you see where I'm going? It's within all of us. So, to bring it home, if the so-called white man, the European, if you still feel that that is the devil, which I just showed you is falsehood, then how could they possibly be telling us the truth that we are Moors? How could they possibly be telling you about Allah's prophet, Noble Drew Ali, the Moor Science Temple of America, if they're falsehood? Why would they be doing that if they are the devil? No. Contrary. They are exhibiting their God self. When Peter Moon, when James Reston, when Peter Lamborn Wilson, when all of these European Karen Hudes, when they're speaking about the Moors and they're speaking truth, they're exhibiting their God self, their higher self. That's the truth. Now what you need to ask yourself is this. For those that are going against this truth, for those that are calling us black and not Moors, because remember, in the Holy Quran, chapter 48, the end of time and the fulfilling of prophecies, says very clearly, line 10, "Come all ye Asiatic of America and hear the truth about your nationality and birthrights, because you are not Negroes." You are not black people. You are not people of color. You're not African Americans. You're not Afro Americans. If that's telling us the truth, then we are not those things. That we are not blacks, but we are Moors. What are the people that are telling us that? What are they representing? If this is the truth and they are telling you contrary to the truth, the reverse of the truth, are they not in their lower self? Are they not representing the devil? Think about it. This is for all the so-called black leaders, the so-called RBGs, whoever and anybody that you can think of that continues to spread the falsehood that we are black people. Are they working out of their God self, their higher self, or their lower self, their devil self? Interesting, right? And I'm going to close out. Yesterday was the solar return, or the born day, of a great messenger, prophet, El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz, also referred to as Malcolm X. I'm going to refer to a couple of things that he said. Here we go. First, in the autobiography of Malcolm X, on page 347, this is his letter that he wrote from Mecca. Throughout my travels in the Muslim world, I have met, talked to, and even eaten with people who in America would have been considered white, but the white attitude was removed from their minds by the religion of Islam. I have never before seen sincere and true brotherhood practiced by all colors together, irrespective of their color. You may be shocked by these words coming from me, but on this pilgrimage, what I have seen and experienced has forced me to rearrange much of my thought patterns previously held, and to toss aside some of my previous conclusions. This was not too difficult for me. Despite my firm convictions, I have been always a man who tries to face facts and to accept the reality of life as new experience and new knowledge unfolds it. I have always kept an open mind, which is necessary to the flexibility that must go hand in hand with every form of intelligent search for truth. Allah being truth. Interesting. During the past 11 days here in the Muslim world, I have eaten from the same plate, drunk from the same glass, and slept in the same bed or on the same rug, while praying to the same God with fellow Muslims, whose eyes were the bluest of blue, whose hair was the blondest of blonde, and whose skin was the whitest of white. Understand? Really not white, but, we understand, brother El-Hajj Malik. And in the words and in the actions and in the deeds of the quote-unquote white Muslims, I felt the same sincerity that I felt among the quote-unquote black African Muslims of Nigeria, Sudan, and Ghana. We were truly all the same. Now, if that wasn't enough, I'm going to take you to another book. Now, this is the Diary of Malcolm X, El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz, 1964, edited by Herb Boyd and Ilasa El-Shabazz. I don't know if that's how you pronounce the sister's name. Read a brief little excerpt here. The diary provides Malcolm's meticulous documentation of his pilgrimage to Mecca, his stay in Africa and the Middle East, and the many people, famous or otherwise, he meets. The heart of the diary is Malcolm's observations, impressions, circumstances he encounters, and his own feelings of trepidation and self-doubt during his travels. In many ways, the diary complements and amplifies his autobiography with its open and honest discourse. So I'm not going to read most of it because I would urge you to pick this up yourself. But please know that these entries are Malcolm's his own diary entries when he was on his travels, straight from him, not through the as told by Alex Haley, which, just for the record, is known and is proven to be a plagiarist. Look it up for yourself. The whole story of the roots was plagiarized by, I forget the brother's name, but a European brother at that. Ironic, isn't it? But that's for another day. I want to focus on page 77, where he's meeting with some very important people, and I'm just going to read this small segment right here. MS was the only one who spoke English, so he was the interpreter. We were there almost 2 hours, a real honor, but it showed how interested he was in the American Muslims. We had tea, the lights went out in the entire area twice. Later we moved from his living room to an outside garden where it was much cooler. He was shocked when MS explained to him about Elijah Muhammad and the secretaries whose virginity had been violated. They questioned me at length about Elijah Muhammad's theology, his origin, his program, his basic integrity, whether or not his aims and teachings about the white man were based on ignorance or design. Let me read that again. They questioned me at length about Elijah Muhammad's theology, his origin, his program, his basic integrity, whether or not his aims and teaching about the white man were based on ignorance or by design. El-Hajj Malik replied, by design. Page 77. Don't believe me? Look it up for yourself. People that are teaching the white man is the devil. As far as I know, as far as I can trace back, it came from, matter of fact, let me see if I can find this real quick. In Peter Lamborn Wilson's book. Page 29. This is talking about when Noble Drew Ali moved from New Jersey with the Canaanite temple that was set up in 1913 to Chicago in 1925. And it's talking about the different reasons perhaps why the move happened. Other reasons are given for the move to Chicago. That the Moors were persecuted for refusing conscription during World War I, or that Drew Ali was discomforted by the appearance of a Russo-Syrian peddler of silks and raincoats named Abdul Wali Farad Muhammad Ali, who began to lure some of the Moors away to his own brand of Islam, closer to the Arabic model, but apparently tainted with race hatred, the white man as blue-eyed devil. This may or may not be the same Wallace Farad who later, according to Moorish legend, convinced Elijah Muhammad to leave Moor science and set up the Nation of Islam, also known as the Black Muslims. And that's from the Sacred Drift. As far as I know, the teaching of the black man is the devil, because I've also heard it with the Nation of Gods and Earths. But as far as I can tell from the research I found, that it dates back to the Nation of Islam. And we have to be clear about something. The Nation of Islam did not officially begin until 1930, 1 year after Drew Ali left the scene.
Now let's look at Noble Drew Ali. Here's a man that died a young man. Noble Drew Ali. He lived from 1886 to 1929. I salute my brother
He's the first man to bring Islam to us in the way he tried to bring it. And I thank him, thank Allah for him. He said the Moors were enslaved by reducing their mentality to that of Negroes, blacks, and colored people. As a man thinketh, so is he. Moors, you sleep too much. He's calling all black people in America Moors. But Moors is the name given to the Muslims from North Africa that invaded the Iberian Peninsula and brought Islam to Spain and Portugal and southern France. So he's calling us Moors, and he dressed his followers in the fez of the Muslim people of the East. Look at what he said. The Moors were enslaved by reducing their mentality to that of Negroes, blacks, and colored people. As a man thinketh, so is he. Moors, you sleep too much. Wake up and see the 7 bridges crossing in the sky. Can you see that you are a people? Not an organization. We are a people. We are a nation.
So in conclusion, to answer the question one more time, is the white man the devil? No. The devil is your lower self. It is our lower selves. The devil is falsehood. And the devil will pass away. Because truth changes not. I'm going to read a few statements from the Prophet, Noble Drew Ali. And we're going to close out. This is coming from the Oral Statements and Prophecies of Prophet Noble Drew Ali. And number 86 says, the Holy Prophet Noble Drew Ali told the Moors, children, when you get on top, treat them nice. When the Moors get on top, they are told we must treat the European nice. Why? Universal law. The energy we put out is the energy we get back. We can treat them as they have treated us, and the cycle will continue. That's why love is the first principle. And right behind that is truth. And number 232, Brother J. Foster Bay of Temple number 4 and 25 said that the Holy Prophet said, the European is our fellow man. Then finally, reading from a statement entitled, Prophet Drew Ali Speaks to the Nations. If you have race pride and love your race, join the Moor Science Temple of America and become a part of this divine movement. Then you will have the power to redeem your race, because you will know who you are and who your forefathers were. Because where there is unity, there is strength. Together we stand, divided we fall. Come, good people, because I, the prophet, sent to redeem this nation from mental slavery, which you have now. Mental slavery. Need every one of you who think that your condition can be better. This is a field open to strong men and women to uplift the nation and take your place in the affairs of men. If the Europeans and other nations are helping me, why not you? If the Europeans and other nations are helping me, why not you, Mr. Black Man? It is your problem. The Negro problem, the black problem, is being solved only as it can, and that is by the Moorish national and divine movement. If you have a nation, you must have a free national name in order to be recognized by this nation as an American citizen. This is what was meant when it said, "Seek ye first the kingdom of heaven, and all these things would be added unto you." By Prophet Noble Drew Ali. This is the truth. I hope you're listening. Peace and love.